I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are as an organization, why we did this analysis, give a little bit of background on Initiative 2C, Ballot Initiative 2C, and then we'll dive right into the financial analysis. You should have a copy of the full report, so please consider this just the highlights. Anything that we refer to in the presentation that's not referenced, you will find referenced in the report itself. There are a lot of footnotes and hyperlinks, so we hope that that gives you lots of good information. All right, so first of all, Empower Our Future. Most of the people on the call today are active members of Empower Our Future. I'm so delighted to be a part of this community-based coalition of community organizations, local businesses, and individuals. The thing that brings us together is our shared commitment to bringing a local clean energy future to Boulder. We prepared this financial analysis. Many of the people you just met were a part of that, primarily because we had lots of new information here in 2020 that hadn't been put into the last financial analysis that the city did back in 2018. Since then, the prices for renewable energy have come down dramatically, and bond prices, which is a big part of the expense of implementing a local power system, have come down as well. And the combination of those two things, plus increased electrification, led us to believe that, gee, we think this is probably a better deal than ever, but nobody's really updated it or looked at the figures. So we're going to do that for them. A little bit of background on Ballot Initiative 2C. Essentially, it proposes that we re-enter a franchise agreement with Xcel for essentially another generation, 20 more years. We've been out of franchise with Xcel since 2010. That's when we voted to pursue a municipally owned electric utility. And really, we've continued to get power from Xcel since then. If we're out of franchise, we will continue to get power from Xcel until we've implemented our own local system. So nothing would really change if we stay out of franchise. The new franchise agreement would require Xcel to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2030. That's relative to 2005. And our beef with that is that, the state of Colorado passed a bill last year requiring utilities to do just that, to reduce their emissions by 80% by 2030. So the upside for Boulder in terms of additional climate benefits is no better than what Xcel has to do for the rest of the state anyway. Our other concern is that the franchise agreement was drafted primarily behind closed doors with two of our city council members and Xcel executives. And as you can see by the people on this call, we feel like we have a tremendous amount of community expertise that should have been included in those negotiations. It's also important to note that this ballot initiative was put on the ballot by the city council without any kind of citizen-led petition to do so. So it turns out, I mentioned that renewably sourced electricity prices are down. We know specifically that they're down for Boulder because we put out an RFP in July and got responses in September that indicated that 100% renewable electricity prices were down somewhere between 8 to 15%, according to the summary that was done by the city. And you can find a link to that summary in the report. In addition to that, current bond rates are 2.5 to 4.5 percentage points below what was used in the last financial analysis in 2018. In that analysis, they used a rate of 7% for taxable bonds and 6% for tax-exempt bonds. And now we're down in the neighborhood of 2 to 4%. You'll see the figures that we used in coming slides. But it's kind of like if you were getting a mortgage on a house and the mortgage rates were 7% versus 3%, the financial outcome would look very, very different. And so that's made a huge impact on the financial viability of a local electric utility. In addition to that, electricity use, according to the state of Colorado, who released a report in September, is expected to rise across the state by 1.4% per year for the next 10 years and may accelerate after that. If you take a look around Boulder, even though you've been here a short time, you probably see a lot of Teslas. And you may know that we have a big initiative for electrifying our buildings. So we feel that the growth in electrification will happen much more quickly in Boulder. And you'll see that reflected in the numbers that we've used in the analysis. And piled on top of that is, as Leslie just mentioned, Excel rates are projected to continue to rise. Excel continues to have record level revenues and profits. Those profits go primarily into the pockets of Excel executives and shareholders, not into the Boulder community. And we would like the opportunity with a local electric utility to be able to keep rates low while still investing in our own community. So in terms of the methodology, the city actually did a very nice financial forecasting tool in 2018. It's available on the city's website. And again, you can find the link to that in our report. That financial analysis tool is a many-page spreadsheet that many members of this team got into and understood very well. So we used that very same model. All we did was update the variables to 2020 current states. Since there are ranges that you could use for most of the variables, we offered 3 plausible scenarios. One was a break-even scenario, which used the most conservative values for those variables. And in that break-even scenario, it essentially shows that we could run a local electric utility with about the same financial results at Excel with very, very conservative assumptions. Then we took a look at what if those variables were a little better? What if electric rates were a little better? What if bond rates were a little better? What if we were increasing our electrification? What would that look like? And that was our better scenario. And then we took it even a little better than that while staying still conservative for an even better scenario. And you'll see the results of that in just a moment. We're analyzing savings relative to continuing with Excel, and we also took a look at cumulative cash flow. So that's cash flow that would be available after all of our expenses, after operational expenses and working capital, that would be available for us to invest in our community, or perhaps to even defray the expense of renewable electricity for those members of our community who can least afford it. It's also super important to note that we used in our analysis, in the most conservative break-even analysis, an electricity mix that was sourced with 89% renewable energy. In the better and even better scenarios, we used 100% renewable electricity pricing as it came in the RFP, the responses to the RFP that we got in September. And this is relative to Excel, who has promised somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70% renewable electricity by 2030. Our community stated goal, again, if you look at the city's website under climate initiatives, you'll see the community stated goal is 100% by 2030, and that's our goal too. So here are some of the assumptions that we used. Let me move these pictures around a little bit so I can. There are 3 rows here, the break even, the better, and the even better. First of all, with regard to renewables, in the break even case, we used 89% renewable energy and 100% renewable energy for better and even better, which we feel in an age of increasing electrification is super important. If you electrify everything and you're still powering it with dirty electricity, you're certainly not benefiting from electrification. In fact, you're just accelerating the negative impacts of not using a clean electricity supply. As far as the price for power supply goes, based on the responses to the RFP, we used a price that was 10% below what was used in 2018 for break even and better, and 15% below for even better. In terms of load forecast, we use the state of Colorado's conservative assumption that electrification loads would go up by 1.4% per year in the break-even case. Since Boulder is electrifying more quickly than the rest of the state, we use 2% for better and 3% for even better. Acquisition cost has to do with what it would cost, what it would take for us to purchase the Excel assets for the distribution of electricity in Boulder. We used the worst case scenario provided by the city of 192 million for break even. And we used the most recent figures offered to Excel of 85 million for even better, and we struck something in between for the better case. For interest rates, this is taxable, and tax exempt. We started with a break-even case with a very conservative case that we wouldn't be able to get a very high quality bond rate in the beginning until we have a track record as an electric utility. So we used the most conservative 4.5% and 3.5% for tax and taxable and tax exempt respectively. I'd like to point out that's way below the 7 and 6 that was used in the 2018 analysis. We used the best case scenario for better rated bonds of 2.5% and 1.75% in the even better case, and struck a midline for the better case. DSCR stands for debt service recovery. That's debt service, I can never remember the C, Leslie.
Debt service coverage ratio.
Coverage. I wanted to say recovery, debt service coverage ratio. So the city requires that we set aside at least 25%. So essentially a debt service coverage ratio of 1.25 for the electric utility, so that we have a cushion to cover our debts, a cushion from our operating income. In our case, we used 1.5 as a more conservative assumption in all three cases. The city had made some projections on what it would cost to run our own electric utility. And in their financial forecasting tool, you're able to say, okay, we're going to use that figure, or we're going to inflate it by 10%, or say maybe we could do 10% better than that. In the break-even case, we said, okay, maybe we're going to do, it'll cost us 10% more than they projected. In the better case, we said it would cost exactly what they projected. And in the even better, we said, hopefully we could get to 10% less than what they projected. Setup and startup costs have to do with the engineering it takes to separate from the Excel system. And we have pretty good estimates, so we use the same number in all three cases of 217 million. And stranded costs is a number that is established by FERC. You'll see a big discussion of this in the report. In the worst case scenario, we believe that we would pay about $188 million to Excel. It's essentially to reimburse them for power that they won't be selling to us. In the best case, in the better and even better cases, we used 100 million, even though precedents have been set in several cities that have notified their electric providers that they will no longer need their services, like Boulder did with Excel 10 years ago. And those judgments have indicated stranded costs of 0. So we're using the very, very conservative number of 100 million in this case. And here are the results. We're starting with the net present value of savings for 5 years out and 10 years out. That's the net present value in terms of the difference in revenue requirements between a local utility and Excel. And you can see in every case it's positive. In the break-even case, by year 5, the net present value of our savings would be almost $1 million, and by year 10, over 28 million. And in the even better case, we're talking about numbers ranging from 150 million to almost 400 million. So to those people who say, gosh, we've spent so much money on this already, we really want to point out that in a very short period of time, this investment pays back to the community big time. In addition, we took a look at the cash flow. How are things going to look over a period of time? And again, it turns out both by year 5 and by year 10, we're looking at the neighborhood of between 50 million and $500 million in cumulative cash flow. Again, these are monies that could be reinvested in Boulder, distributed to Boulder, used to implement more modern microgrid technology and storage technology. And I know you've been here a short time, Deborah, but we do get 300 days of sunshine a year. So having more and more renewably sourced energy right here on our rooftops could be made more possible by reinvesting this cumulative cash flow in Boulder. Here are the results aggregated together. This is a bar chart essentially showing the costs for the three scenarios. You'll see that the debt service cost goes down from left to right as we've used lower interest rates, which we believe is very much possible, particularly as bonds are refinanced as we get a track record for our utility. Operations and maintenance costs go down a little bit from scenario to scenario. Energy cost actually goes up because we've projected a higher amount of electrification, so we would be buying more electricity. Other costs remain relatively flat, but the green on top, what Leslie likes to call the green frosting on the cake, is what we'd really like you to focus on, because in the better and even better scenarios, the cash generated for the Boulder community is very, very compelling. It's also important to note, since we're all climate activists, what the climate impact is of going with a local utility relative to sticking with the Xcel franchise. Xcel has committed to less than 70% renewably sourced electricity by 2030, whereas both of our better and even better models offer the community 100% renewably sourced electricity. Xcel has committed to a greenhouse gas reduction of 80% over 2005. The reason that that's different from their renewably sourced electricity commitment is that they can get to that greenhouse gas reduction using other means like burning gas or fossil gas. We, on the other hand, in our local power goals, have a goal, and you'll see this again on the city's website, for a 100% greenhouse gas reduction from electricity, which, by the way, is the largest contributor to our greenhouse gas footprint in Boulder. Currently, it contributes 44% of our greenhouse gas footprint. Xcel has no quantified commitment to local energy production, whereas our community goal is to have 100 megawatts of local generation by 2030. Xcel, of course, is a for-profit company and indeed has had a monopoly in Boulder for well over a century, whereas a local power utility would be more equitable. We could reinvest in a way that is better for Boulder's community, and we can offer electricity and adopt the newest technology at a rate that works for us. And this last statistic is probably the most amazing to me. Going with Xcel would cost us an additional 215,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases a year. Just to give you some feeling for what that is, that's like taking 46,000 plus cars off the road. And by the way, in Boulder, we have a little over 69,000 cars registered. So that'd be like taking 2/3 of the traffic off the road in terms of climate impact. That'd be like not using over 24 million gallons of gasoline. That'd be like not burning over 236 million pounds of coal. And it would basically be like offsetting the electricity use in over 36,000 homes in Boulder. And since we only have about 42,000 residences, that's like 85% of the homes in Boulder. So the difference between going with this franchise agreement and staying with our local power initiative is huge from a climate perspective. And on top of that, our conclusion is we can afford it. Even the most conservative scenario generates significant net savings relative to Xcel. And you're looking at a chart here that shows the cumulative cash flow for all three scenarios measures in the hundreds of millions after just 10 years. We believe that remaining flexible is critical. I was telling the reporters yesterday, you know, it seems impossible, but the iPhone was only introduced in 2007, a mere 13 years ago. And look at how smartphones have changed the way we do things, have changed that whole industry. We can't even find our way across town without Google Maps and our smartphones anymore. And our position that is that in the next 20 years, our electric system and our energy system in general is going to enjoy a similar renaissance, a similar paradigm shift in new technologies, in energy sourcing, in energy storage, and in energy distribution. And that locking ourselves into a franchise with a company that operates primarily for the benefit of its shareholders is ill-advised, particularly at this point in time. So that's our presentation for today. I'll open it up for questions. I'll share the whole screen so we can all take a look.